When I make these videos, I do it because I genuinely care about my audience. I genuinely care about the people who tune in every day to see what I have to say. And I get it. You're not always going to agree with me. You're not always going to understand where I'm coming from. But it's more so about planting a seed. And that seed in your mind can then start to cultivate and fertilize and become a sprout and then grow into something if you let it. If the knowledge that I'm trying to share with you ends up breaking through to the surface. There have been many people throughout history that have had their words rejected initially, but then looked back upon very fondly. And I'm not considering myself to be a Jesus of the video game industry. I'm not considering myself to be a metal Jesus of the video game industry. But when I talked about the video game crash that was happening and how things were going to get worse, I feel like a lot of people didn't understand where I was coming from. You had to dig a little bit beneath the top layer and get down into the nitty gritty to kind of see where everything was going. But if by July of 2025 you don't see the writing on the wall, I honestly feel like you're never going to see the writing on the wall, because now we don't even have to dig very deep to see what's happening with the video game industry and the crash of 2025 that I was right about. Let's take a look at our three major companies and see what's happening with them. Let's start out with good old Xbox. If you don't see the destruction of Xbox happening right before your eyes, I do not know what to tell you. Spoiler alert, the Asus ROG Xbox Ally is not the future of handheld gaming. It is the current of handheld gaming, because you could do every single thing on that thing that you can do currently on a ROG Ally, minus the little interface that they are putting on the new system that's also being introduced to the standard ROG Ally that's already out on the marketplace. If that thing sells over 1 million copies, I would be genuinely shocked, because there is no mass appeal for that. Xbox as a company, Microsoft just laid off 9,000 people. Ooh, some of them weren't Xbox people. Some of them weren't Xbox. It's just Microsoft. A lot of them were Xbox. A lot of them, so much in fact that full studios closed down. And these are not just like small studios. These are large studios that have been working on projects for many, many years now, including games like Perfect Dark, which have also been canceled. When you cancel a game that has the name notoriety of something like Perfect Dark, I feel like that creates a large issue. That issue being the fact that now, to me, nothing is off the table to be canceled. If you're willing to cancel Perfect Dark, which is a game that would be like canceling, announcing, showcasing, and then canceling a new Banjo-Kazooie. I get it. Maybe the series hasn't been doing much recently, but when you see the buzz and excitement online for certain titles, especially games that tug on nostalgic strings, and then you cancel that game, I feel like your whole lineup of games can be cancelable. You got to remember, people, the problems that we talked about with the crash in Xbox previously were the fact that they were putting all of their games onto other platforms after people like Phil Spencer lied to our faces and said, oh, no, it's just a couple of games. The whole slate isn't coming. And then that was a freaking lie, because pretty much everything is coming now, including Gears of War on PlayStation 5. But this is a company that people still have trust in, a company that is willing to get rid of people willy-nilly, people that have been with a company for a very long time, people in prominent roles, people that were developing games for the platform, and people still trust in Xbox. The Xbox fanboys, they took a hit. They were like, oh no, all these people got laid off. I feel so bad. And then the next day they were celebrating a new game getting announced, because these people don't care. They have a parasocial relationship with Xbox. They are sitting there doing the exact same thing that they blame other people of doing, which is capitalizing and quote unquote grifting on things that are happening within the video game industry. Yet you could go on their YouTube channels and their Twitter feeds where they make money off those things, and they're doing the exact same thing by talking about the situation. It's a crazy phenomenon that they don't understand and don't realize the hypocrisy that lies within it, but that's not what we're here to talk about. But I do feel like it plays a role, because these glazers of the Xbox brand are not just community fanboys. These are people that have a direct line of communication with people like Phil Spencer and Aaron Greenberg, people that are high up within the Xbox ecosystem, telling them, oh, everything's great. This is a great idea. I feel like it's a culture of yes men. You look at Xbox console sales, they're in the toilet. When was the last time a first-party Xbox game sold 1 million copies plus on the Xbox platform? Everything goes to Game Pass. But the problem with Game Pass is eventually, aka now, it is going to stagnate in how people are accessing it. And it has been stagnant for a pretty long time, much like Xbox console sales. Why is that? Because people are not seeing the value in buying an Xbox platform quite like they were in the future. But that's not stopping Xbox from talking about brand new hardware that's going to be linked with AMD and a custom chipset. You literally made that announcement before you laid off thousands of employees, canceled games, canceled projects, canceled Perfect Dark, canceled Everwild, got rid of funding for Romero Games' game, who is now struggling and on life support to stay alive. What the hell are we doing here? And you could say that it's Satya Nadella. You could say that it's Phil Spencer. All of these people are encompassing of the product. All of these people are encompassing of the brand, because those are the people that are in charge. Those are the people that are put into this limelight. You could say that people are jerking Phil around. I was going to say jerking Phil off and make a joke, but I was going to laugh at it anyways. You could say people are pulling Phil Spencer in multiple directions and making him change things. But at some point in time, he has to take accountability. Sarah Bond has to take accountability. Matt Booty has to take accountability. And I feel like the Xbox brand just doesn't have much going right now. And I don't want to see Xbox go under, but we've never seen a situation like Xbox before. The most comparable thing would be Sega when they left the console market, but Xbox is still in the console market. And they expect all of this to work out. You get fudge numbers with things from insiders and crap like that. Like, there's a whole defense force for what Xbox is doing. And you kind of have to wonder, what's the benefit? Is that Phil Spencer Xbox signed mug really worth it to you? Xbox is in shambles. PlayStation is in a very different situation than Xbox, but I do not feel like it is an ideal situation at all. When you look at things that have been happening within PlayStation, there are a few similarities when it comes to things like games as a service. How many games as a service games have been canceled by PlayStation that took a lot of time and took a lot of effort and took money to make? And now that's money that has been lost with it. You honestly think that Lawbreakers is still going to come out? Spoiler alert. That game might as well just be canceled right alongside of Factions, the bomb that was a game like Concord, and all of those other things. Sony still wants games as a service to work, and we'll get into why games as a service is such a main focal point in just a few moments, but they still want to make it work because they want that easy money. If you have one success, you can have 1 million failures, and it doesn't matter because that one success will trump all of those failures. But the problem is Sony hasn't had that one success except for something like Helldivers, which did sneakily well on things like PC and PlayStation 5. So well, in fact, that now PlayStation is taking a page out of Xbox's playbook and putting Helldivers 2, published by Sony and PlayStation, onto the Xbox consoles. And it's like weird. That's weird to me. I can understand. You can look at Xbox and understand what they're trying to do, maybe, even though the fact that a console still exists within the Xbox ecosystem, so you would think they would want to drive people to that console. Whatever, play anything, anywhere. It's really hitting with people, isn't it? You know, but taking a PlayStation successful exclusive game and then putting it onto the Xbox ecosystem that is published by PlayStation is a very interesting decision, because we also saw a game like Lego Horizon Adventures come to the Nintendo Switch, and you could sit there and say, well, how is it any different than MLB The Show? MLB The Show, Sony had to do that. The MLB forced their hand and made them do that. But with this game, this was a conscious decision. And you could say, oh, well, it's just a multiplayer game. What does it matter? If the industry was in such a healthy position, like it has been in the past, consistently growing, not, budgets not outweighing the cost of the games themselves, things being able to profit and bloom and prosper and continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger, why would these companies be putting games onto other platforms? Why now, all of a sudden, when this wasn't a thing that happened in the past? The video game industry is changing. Okay, why is it changing? There has to be a reason for something to change. If something is working, something is going well, what's your incentive to change it? Don't you remember during the PlayStation 4, towards the end of the PlayStation 4 generation, Sean Layden and PlayStation coming out there and saying, hey, we don't want to do cross-play with Fortnite. PlayStation is the best place to play. If that's the case, why are you putting your games onto other platforms? Why are you letting people dabble into other ecosystems? Is it because maybe you don't have a great turnout of first party games right now? The turnout of first party games hasn't been exactly lighting the world on fire. It seems like Ghost of Yotai, I don't know how to say it. I'm white. It seems like that's going to be the big game for PlayStation 5 owners in 2025 from a first party PlayStation studio. And it looks good, but I mean, is that enough for people? You could also say Death Stranding too, but I mean, that's kind of a multi-platform game. We saw Death Stranding come to other platforms. Sony did help fund it, but it wasn't a first-party Sony game. What are these first-party Sony studios actually doing? Oh, a lot of them were working on the games as a service bullshit. You know, that whole thing that's happening because they want the easy money. But if you look at statistics from last year, we clearly see something that is happening within the video game industry that can end up being catastrophic. But I'm not going to tell you what that is until the end of the video, because next up, we got to talk about Nintendo. Well, what are you going to say about Nintendo, RGT? Everything's good with Nintendo, RGT. Everything is fine. Look at the Switch 2 sales, the fastest selling console. Look at Mario Kart World sales and all that sort of stuff. And you're right. They're off to a very good start with the Nintendo Switch 2. But if you don't see cracks in the foundation that can turn into major problems, you are looking at a very nearsighted solution with this. Of course, the biggest issue going on right now with the Nintendo Switch 2 is the whole situation involving game key cards and physical games and digital games, because realistically speaking, one of the downfalls of the current gaming society will be the move to the all-digital future. And I know people say, oh, well, Steam works great. How would it be any different than Steam? Because it would be different than Steam, because instead of Steam having, you know, all of these different games from all of these different publishers, you're going to have one dedicated ecosystem to each individual console. Maybe not even the Xbox, because it seems like Xbox is going to implement Steam into their next console, meaning that the Nintendo Switch 2 and the PlayStation 5/6 will each have their own individual ecosystems. A controlled thing where there are no discounts, there are no used games, there are no things that happen without a company deciding to do it consciously, because you don't have to worry about retail sales or anything like that. And when you have digital distribution of games, your ownership is very, very different. Games can be pulled, games can be removed from you. And when you look at the Nintendo Switch 2, spoiler alert, 95% of the games that are going to come out on the system are going to be game key cards or digital games, code in a box games. Companies are not putting their games on the Switch 2 cartridge because of the 64 gigabyte cartridge size. Nintendo, of course, will do it for most of their games. I mean, realistically speaking, they've released 2 games on the Switch 2, and 50% of them have been digital only with Nintendo Switch 2 World Tour. You honestly think that smaller games like that are going to get physical releases? No, because it's going to cost money, and third-party companies don't want to spend the $17+ to get the 64 gigabyte cartridge to put out a game at $40 or $50, because they're not going to be able to sell it at that much, because they're not going to make money. So then what do? They have to raise the price of the game to $60 or $70. And a lot of times, if it's cheaper on another platform, nobody's going to buy it on the Switch 2 anyways. This is a massive looming problem that is quickly dissipating the physical era of video games. Now, I am someone that has kind of moved on to a more digital mindset, and I don't hate the game key cards. But when you look at Nintendo Switch 2 sales statistics, or Switch 1, I should say, sales statistics for software, a vast majority of people do want physical games. The Japanese audience does want physical games, and to get rid of physical games except for first-party games kind of alienates a large segment of your user base. Now, Nintendo could do something to figure that out and alleviate third parties having to make that decision, but if you look historically speaking, Nintendo really doesn't care about third-party companies. They really don't. Ever since the Super Nintendo with the ESRB and Howard Lincoln censoring stuff, the N64 by using a cartridge-based medium, causing Square to go over to PlayStation, the GameCube using the mini DVD systems, the Wii being a vastly underpowered system comparative to the PS3 and the Xbox 360, the Wii U being a weird sort of thing, and then you have the Switch, which was a big success for Nintendo, so third-party companies ended up coming back to want to put their games on the system, but now we have a roadblock with the Switch 2, and Nintendo never really did much to alleviate those situations with the previous systems and third-party companies, so why would they do that now? But like I said, you can look at third-party companies as well, major games flopping, games not hitting sales numbers, stagnant studios, more studio closures, more studio layoffs. Pretty much every freaking day there are layoffs within the industry. But the biggest issue happening right now within the video game industry is something that not a lot of people are talking about. And that is less spending within the video game industry, because there is a whole generation of people that some of them may be watching this, a younger generation, the 18 to 25 generation, the generation who did not grow up with traditional video game distribution, who's now, getting into, more powerful games and now has disposable income to where they could spend money. They haven't moved on from a lot of their free to play games. They haven't moved on to games that cost money, and year after year we're seeing a diminishing amount of people actually buying games within that demographic because they're not interested in buying games. They have the games that they like. They have their comfort food games, and that's kind of what they stick with. And if that continues to happen, if spending goes down and down within the video game industry with a large segment of that video game audience, that is going to spell an absolute disaster. None of this will be as bad as 1983. I've clearly said that time and time again when talking about this topic. But to act like there's not going to be a major shift within the video game industry, to act like you're not seeing a major shift within the video game industry as it stands right now, with companies doing things that can be detrimental in the long term, detrimental in the short term, massive changes within the short term and long term as well, you are just being blind to it. You are a fanboy of the industry, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to understand that there are things happening behind the scenes. There are things happening more so than meets the eye. And I feel like I've done a good job of laying out at least some of the problems. I could have gone down many other different avenues of other issues, problems, and concerns that people should have about the video game industry, because if you care about this industry and you want to see it grow, it's growing in one way with record-breaking profits. But then you get into the focus of the shareholders. Well, RGT, there's always been shareholders. Yeah, as a company gets bigger, dingus, more shareholders come in and they become a priority instead of just something that exists in the background, which you're seeing with these companies now. But I don't expect people to understand that because, I did take, a year of business at community college. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think of it in the comments section down below. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, it's all good at the end of the day. This is just my opinion. It's just how I see things, and maybe people see things differently. And as always, thank you for checking out this video. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Be sure to like, comment, share, hit the bell as well. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.